Hi, Gary. We're back. Back to paint more of this guy. Let's see. I don't remember what exact colors I used, but that's okay. Because like I've said before, it's not super important. We're just going to grab some tones that are close. Yeah. The exact color is not super important. As long as we are roughly using the same, everything's gonna be okay. Where is... Yep, here we go. Nice deep dark brown. Yeah, we can always mix something that's similar, right? So I think what we're gonna do is the face is like semi-painted at this point. Obviously there's refinement and stuff to do, but I think a good thing would be to do some more work on the rest of the skin. So we can get something, like this. If I place down here, right? You can see it's close enough. Nothing is set in stone yet. Good evening. Thanks, Dodge. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for the tier 1. How you doing? All right, so we're just going to start to place in some more lights on the back. We're just going to keep advancing the placement of the lights until we get it to where we're happy with, and then we can begin to refine further. I'm good. Enjoying this figure and just working my way through the steps. How's everybody else doing? Good? Okay, so we start to get some of the... What's going on? My roommate's texting me. Oh, apparently there was a Kingdom Death sale. Word. That's important. That's important information to know. Good evening. Good evening. All right, so this kind of part, right? We got to think about how his back kind of goes down and under, right? So this part of his back here is going to be much darker. We won't end up with much of this like super dark tone towards the end. You can see almost all of it's gone on the front. We can reintroduce some of that dark color. In fact, let's grab just a bit of black in case we need to go even darker. Thanks, Timbo. Yeah, it's really cool. Right, so we can really push some of this. If we want to have some really dark tones in the back. You can see it almost like when we mix this and this, right? So we mix the royal brown with some of this blue. Okay, you can see it's like this brownish black. We can add a little black, maybe a little more of the royal brown. Okay, it looks quite black on the screen, but you can see when I place it on the figure, it's not pure black. This isn't even pure black. This is like a dark brown. But it almost has this sort of almost purplish tone to it. Well, you're welcome. And then here. Right, so I'm still thinking about this line here. That's this core shadow. And I can continue to push the shadows where I need. And then towards the upper back, we're going to have to add more light to it. Right, so. So I'm just trying to find the volumes. There's not going to be, again, we have to connect the volumes. So I'm being pretty loose, right? I'm not trying to like paint individual little muscles right now. I'm just finding the overall forms. And then back up here, right? So like this is now obviously too dark. So just continue to push the light where I need it. That's right, no muscle islands. And then if the transition here is too much, we can add some more intermediate tones. Okay, now this is probably too bright now. But down here, where the back starts to curve back the other way, it's going to get lighter. So here, right, and this is why this is a very back and forth process. We're just searching for the right values, and it starts to kind of come together. Okay, now this needs to dry. This is still very wet, so we can move over to another place. Hey, what's up, Vincenzo? We start to put some lights in these other areas. I'm good. You? You good? Okay. Not bad. Yeah. Anything in particular? Anything about painting that would be useful that I could talk about? Because I certainly have before also. Hey, thanks for the Prime sub, overrated. Appreciate it. Has it ever happened you went a step backwards? Hi, Mark. Okay. First of all, I don't think you actually have gone a step backwards. I think you just feel like you have, right? And that's a big difference. Like there's a big difference between you feel like you have and you actually have, okay? And I think having that feeling is normal, and learning to push through that feeling and have the confidence in yourself is another skill, right? I don't think that's an odd thing to happen. I think a little people will often doubt themselves. And it can really be hard sometimes to see your own personal growth. And growth as a painter, I think, can happen kind of two ways. I think a lot of the times what happens is you make these like gradual steps, right, towards improvement. And then sometimes you make these like really big jumps, right? You make these like big leaps. You do a piece and then you're like, this is the best piece I've ever done. Clearly it's an improvement. And you can recognize that improvement. But as you become a better painter, I think it's often harder to see those improvements, especially with your own work. You're always going to see the flaws in your own work first. You are your own worst critic, right? I think it's really important, and I feel like I hate to be the boomer here and blame social media. Thanks, Chucko. But I think social media can often give us a false sense of how we're doing. And I think it's really important to find someone who is like really open to give you honest feedback, right? This doesn't mean like tear into you. Like honest feedback can be like, hey, you are doing this better. Here are the things you could be doing better. Right? It's the positives and the negatives. And a lot of times we only see the negatives in our own stuff. Who's that for you, Mark? I know you got someone. Is it Arnow? Or Albert? Is he the guy that will always shoot it to you straight? Because if I can feel it, and I won't put words into who is the person that you go to for honest feedback to keep yourself straight. Yeah, it's me for me too. Right. So if not looking up, not necessarily looking up to the person that's you're like, yeah, this person's going to be honest with me and tell me what they really think, and they'll tell you what they like and what they don't like. It's no good for everyone to just have somebody, telling them how great they are all the time if you want to get better. So if Mark or I can have self-doubt, right? It's not unusual. Ghost Raven Miniatures. Thanks for the prime. This might be too much, but we can pull it back. I wanted to add a little bit more shadow under the rib cage. And yes, that's probably way too much. I really like it. I think the model's fantastic. I think it's got some really interesting anatomy. I think it's got a great expression, and I think it's a really nice figure to practice a lot of different things on. I mean, it's mostly practicing, you know, anatomical stuff, but there's some interesting, like if you want to do tattoo work, or if you want to do little texture of hair, you've got leather, metallic, this kind of, you know, fake leather. Okay. So the idea here is to really create some kind of separation in these planes, right? So if we want really deep shadow in certain areas, that's fine. But we have to understand where that really deep shadow is going to go versus other areas, you know. You can really push the contrast, but if you don't know where to push that contrast, it can look a little funny. Right, so here I want that kind of, the light is really coming from up above. I really want these part of his abdomen to kind of tuck in a little bit, which might mean that I need to shade this down a little more, right? But not a lot. Yeah, it's easy to overdo it. Like here, this part here is like a really subtle detail. So I want that shape to be a little more subtle. Vallejo, a mix of Vallejo and Chimera. Okay, so now I can really push the light. I want the light on him to be intense, like really intense, right? If you've ever seen an actual MMA fight, they take place in an arena with really bright lights, and he's going to be kind of sweaty. So at certain parts, I'm going to want some like super intense shines. So I'm just going to throw some shines on. These are like the specular reflections on his sweaty skin, right? they will not fall in the same way that like they're not the same as like volumetric lights, right? These diffused volumetric lights. They're specular highlights, which are more akin to like non-metallic reflections, right? So if there's multiple spotlights, maybe I do two, right? You guys see on this head where he's got one really strong one right here. And I also do a somewhat more subtle one on this other side. Right? So I can really push certain areas to have really bright shines. And this is going to give him that slightly sweaty appearance. And these will get softened and then pushed more. Right on his shoulder, he'll have one. So think of it like, 1 second. Let me find something. How's this? Is this shiny enough? Well, maybe we can use like a bottle, right? This bottle cap, right? See, it's got see the shine here, here. And if I turn it, you get an actual like reflection of the light. Okay, that's more what we're doing. These, you can see it on my fingernail too, right? This light that moves on my fingernail. Right, that's a specular reflection. Right, there's no white. This intense white here, when I put a drop of water on my skin, right, that bright white doesn't show up unless it's actually reflecting the light. If my skin is dry, right, if my skin's completely dry, I don't get any of those pure white reflections. But if my skin is a little wet, we do. And we're going to play with that. So later, right, when we begin to refine, right now I'm just sketching them in, but later when we begin to refine, we can stipple some of that pure white on to once again give that, see, it's almost like a stippled effect. Here you can barely see it, but here you can really see it. It'll make sense. So we painted mostly normal. I'm just using them to kind of place where I want them to be. Evening Mini-Mancer. So we continue to just make small adjustments. And then eventually it'll get to, as we continue to slowly layer on top of each other. We'll get closer and closer to what we're looking for. Is that helpful? Does that make sense to you guys? I want to make sure that's clear. Okay, so we're just continuing to round out these shapes. All right. Okay. So we do still want to try and reinforce this. So right now, this is like the bottom of his rib cage. This is maybe a little strong. Okay. I don't know if I need this much definition down here. Right. So we can soften some volumes a little bit. Hi, Axel. Hi, Mark. See you later. Right. And then this little, even just this little bit of light right here, right, can help join these two kind of shapes together. It's well, when to decide it's finished is up to you, right? That's not for me to decide. It's for me to decide on this figure, but there isn't a there isn't a clear answer for that, you know? It's all about how much you want to push, right? Something like this, like if this was a, you know, a more impressionistic painting, this level of finish could be fine, right? For me, it's not enough, right? I'm gonna go a lot more refined than this, but there are, you know, the point I'm getting at is there isn't a right and wrong answer. It depends on the effect you're going for. Right? Something like this looks clearly unfinished. But here, this is, you know, maybe this is rough. This is all rough, but there is clearly starting to be some like shape and definition to it, right? And then how much I want to continue to push that shape and definition is up to me. The worst thing I can do, though, is like be inconsistent, right? Now, there are stylistic choices you can make to have some things be more refined than others. But I think having some level of cohesion is important. So now, maybe this muscle needs a bit more. Right, maybe I want a little bit more shadow just here. Possibly there would be a cast shadow from the belt, like I've got to get down in there. Because unless the light was coming directly from the front, then some light would get down into these areas, right? So but then down here, maybe the belt is casting a shadow. So if it's coming like this, maybe it comes like this. Cast a shadow over these muscles. Right, there's a lot of little choices you can make here. something like that. So I say it's about small changes. Planes of light, planes of shadow. And another thing, right? I don't really like this super strong shadow on his chest. If you look at when people really like stretch their pectoral muscle up like that, right? It tends to pull, and you get a lot less. You get a lot less shadow here than you would necessarily like over here. Right? This barely cuts under. Just water. No thinner or medium, just water. And then the chest, right? So now I'm looking at it, and maybe this all needs to be a lot brighter. Right? I can do that with a big change. Because this has mostly just been a sketch, I don't feel, I haven't done a lot of time investment to say like, oh no, I can't make like a large change. Like, why wouldn't this be in light? And his chest is fairly like a flat plane, right? This all basically is one big shape. And I can use much more subtle differences. Hello, I'm just gonna go Goosey. Okay, you can see, right? I'm not concerned with making a large change. You can see even while the paint's wet, right? Like these kind of shines showing up. One or 2 days is not unusual. Right. I often will have to refresh. If I do a long painting session, I sometimes have to refresh. They're not designed to last, forever. Even though it's even though Redgrass calls it the everlasting wet palette, that is not entirely true. I like my Redgrass wet palette, but It is not everlasting. I'll tell you that. So like here, maybe I use a few dots, right? This all helps build up texture. Get your hangover? Hello. Did I miss Ghost Raven? Did I? I thought I got you. Thanks for the Prime Man in case I missed it. I'm sorry if I did. I get kind of into painting and sometimes I forget whether I thank someone or not. Miniature Elba? Miniature Elba. So here I can paint some. Just do some dots. And you can kind of see already, like just by placing this light here along this volume, right? It's along this line that it gives this sort of sense of shininess to his skin. And some parts might be more shiny than others. Right? You can see it like reflect in the light. And we build them up and we tone them down and we build them up and we tone them down and blah, 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 until we get it to where we want it to be. Right here, okay. I'm going to do something real quick. I want you guys to see something. This could be a little trick for you. If I just take a bunch of water, right? I just put a bunch of water on top of them. You see the shine? Right? I can use that shine to kind of inform myself where I want to place these lights. Right now I see one in here. I see clearly a big one right here. Now I'm going to have to wait for that to dry, but it is something you can do. I mean, sometimes I recommend just taking a picture with like a, you know, some primer is kind of semi-gloss depending on what primer you use. And that can also be quite useful for, you take a reference photo, and that'll often give you kind of a reference point to where your specular lights will go. Let me just get some of this water off. So this will dry faster. I think maybe I want a little highlight here. Clearly there's one like down inside this. And there's one like right here. Don't steal all my hacks. Nah, you can have them. They're all yours. I think maybe this one doesn't, maybe this doesn't quite shine as much. I am going to have to figure out where I want the shadow of his head to be, but we can come back to that. There's a lot of muscles in the forearm. We can kind of accentuate some of those if we want. And like here, there's not really two volumes sculpted here, but I can kind of invent a separate volume to sort of sell that there's another muscle there. All of this should probably be pretty bright since it's facing upwards. We'll get some that's like reflecting, some light probably reflecting off the belt. But right now I just want that overall upward facing volume to be pretty bright. Okay. So, kind of starting to come together. And you can still clearly see like all the individual muscles. Even this probably, to me, feels a little too separated at the moment. But if you look at it in isolation, right? If you look at just that muscle by itself, it doesn't, this line of definition doesn't feel that strong, right? You can clearly see that there's a line right here. But if you look at it back here, look how suddenly, like, obvious that is, right? So you have to look at it in totality. Look at your figure at a distance, right? Don't just... If you're always looking at little individual parts instead of the whole, you can become kind of blinded to the big picture. Don't do that. You know? No. It's not Conor McGregor. Hello. Sorry, I don't speak Russian. Or Ukrainian or whichever Slavic language that is. I can't read Cyrillic. Well, thank you. Welcome. It is Justin Gaethje is the intention. Okay, so we just keep pushing the individual elements. But notice I'm always moving around. Right? I'm not just working on one little muscle at a time. I'm working on kind of everything at once. Maybe not his arm, but this portion. So I've heard. All right. So we get a little bit of this grayish tone here, right? It's not gray if I put it on my finger, right? It's clearly not gray. On white, but it is more gray. Right, we can use a little of that. To start to make some of these, like, reflected lights. The important thing when doing any kind of bounce lighting like this is that you don't go brighter than the lights, right? So basically these cannot be brighter than like anything up here. These are in actual light, right? These are in shadow. Thus they have to be in the shadows. So whatever you think, however bright you think you should go with a bounce light, it's typically much more subtle than what you think it is. See, it looks really bright by contrast, but when you start to soften it out, and if you saw it next to an actual light, right? This is what I'm using for a bounce light, this kind of this grayish tone, right? I'll put it on the palette right here, right? It looks bright on the figure next to like almost black, but then you realize that this is the kind of tone I'm using for an actual light. And so be careful. Don't overdo it. Anybody have any questions? You guys are... No, it's not Peter Yan. It's just, well, technically the figure is no one in particular. Okay? So if you want to, let me find it. Where is it? If you would like to get a figure for yourself, you can get it from there. You can see in the official, in Mark's version, that he painted it as to look quite a lot like Charles Oliveira. But the actual figure is no one in particular. And I am painting mine to kind of look like Justin Gaethje, but you could do Peter Yan, you could do a whole lot of people. You could sculpt a bigger beard on him and do Conor McGregor if you actually wanted to, you know, paint that guy. Yeah, sure. Give him some teeth, make him an orc. Give him some big old tusks. But it's a cool figure for that reason, that you can really make it your own. and do a lot of different kind of interpretations of who you think this character is or should be. No, I'm not sending it to Justin. He can buy it if he wants. Yeah, I'll tag him on Instagram. Overnight Prowler, hello. Thanks for following. And I'm painting Uther from Black Crow. Yeah, that's a good one. Which version? Which head? The one that is definitely not the Hound from Game of Thrones, or the other version? Justin Gaethje makes a whole lot more money than I do. He doesn't need any free stuff from me. Dude basically gets an extra $50K every time he fights because he wins so many Fight of the Night bonuses. I'm so out of the loop on MMA these days. I used to follow it in college. Last time I paid attention, so was the best in the world. And well, when isn't John Jones suspended for something? But I don't even know why he's not. He's like injured right now or something. I don't know why he's not fighting. I forget. He wants to fight Stipe Miocic. I'm sure, yeah, like any kind of, I mean, I don't think the art is limited to any particular genre. If you wanted to do a sports diorama, totally do it. You want to do King LeBron? Go right ahead. I think it could be very cool. I mean, I've seen plenty of historical painters and sculptors do like old baseball players and stuff, so I don't see why doing a modern athlete. AK has a figure of, what is it, Maradona? I'm going to see. Had a touch on the football. Don't shoot me, I'm American, you know. I don't follow the footies very close. I know like 5 soccer players. Messi, Ronaldo, Pele, Maradona, and Zidane because he headbutt a guy. No, not that Silva, Anderson Silva. Vanderlei never really did anything in the UFC. He was bigger in Pride. The axe murderer. Yeah, you gotta be more specific when you say Silva in the UFC. Silva is the Smith of Brazil. I'm like, who? Who are you talking about? I know who you meant, but I could see how someone could be confused easily. Because you also had Thiago Silva, Bigfoot Silva, Vanderlei, Anderson. I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking of at the moment. Mirko Prokop. Yeah. Mirko was cool. I don't feel like, this is, I don't know if there's any like real huge superstars in UFC at the moment. You got some like big names, but I mean, they're trying to push guys like Sean O'Malley and stuff, but I don't feel like there's any like gigantic household names at the moment. I mean, people still bring up Conor McGregor, and he hasn't fought in like 4 years or something. And he hasn't won a fight in 6. Iceman, Chuck Liddell. I mean, I can name a ton. But I'm an avid watcher. I know there's other people that are not, they don't watch it like I do. So casual fans or just people who, heard of it. Like everybody knew who Mike Tyson was when Mike Tyson was heavyweight champ. Yeah, let's not talk about Brock Lesnar right now. That's the whole story with Vince McMahon stuff was crazy. Hi, Jonas. How are you? We're just doing some painting, just hanging out, chatting, doing some painting, making little refinements, You can see kind of every little bit, every little brushstroke slowly begins to make it more and more refined until we get it to where we want. Right now, I think it's getting pretty close in terms of, it's still maybe only, the torso is maybe still only halfway done, but it is getting further along. All right, let's really get some deep color in here. All right, so let's just grab some of these two together. A little bit of black. I don't want this like pure desaturated black. If I'm going to use a black, I want a bit more color in it, right? Right, so now it's like this nice deep dark reddish brown. And that just adds this like depth to the black. Probably because you hear the ref names all the time. You see the refs a lot more than you see the actual fight. Like a ref's name could get called like 4 times in a night. And then on every single, one. Well, Herb Dean's the head ref now. He's a big man. John McCarthy doesn't ref for the UFC anymore. Neither does Mario Yamasaki. Yeah, so see here we can get some nice color to our shadows, and then that desaturated bounce light plays more off of that. Here we can kind of invent some more shape and nuance to these sort of areas. When you get really deep into these areas, you get this, what is called ambient occlusion, right? Ambient occlusion is basically where those bounce lights and stuff can't reach, so you get these really dark shadows. Good night. Do I recommend beginners? No, I don't recommend you mix. I don't recommend anyone mixes skin tones from primaries, honestly. Primaries would be like saying mix your skin tones from either red, blue, and yellow, or like cyan, magenta, and yellow. Like, no. You can use orange, you can use lots of different pigments. I do recommend learning to mix your own skin tones so that you can create these sort of variations. But I don't think you need to learn how to mix from primaries. No painter, right? I can't think of like any professional painter, canvas painter, that paints in exclusively primaries. Can you do it? Sure. I don't think it's a particularly useful skill to have. Now we're getting somewhere, huh? So it's starting to look like something. See, this looks shadowed, but this has an even deeper shadow, right? Like, someone like Patrick Jones, for example. Does anybody know who Patrick Jones is? Pretty famous fantasy painter. Yeah. So Patrick Jones paints with, he paints with a lot of, quite a few colors, but like his primary palette consists of like ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, titanium white, and I don't know, something else. Raw umber or burnt umber, some kind of orange, you know. Indian yellow. Right, those aren't primaries. Indian yellow could maybe be considered a primary, but not really. Ultramarine blue is definitely not a primary. Ultramarine blue is far too close to like more of an indigo than it is like a proper blue. Broken posture painting. Hello. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. How are you? Okay, so we need to think about like, basically what I need to do is I need to look at his arm like this and see where that light is, right? If the light's coming directly from above, okay, something like this, I need to see, I can actually use my eye to kind of see where that light's going to hit, right? So I can see where it kind of curves over. So actually, if you look straight down, the brush kind of comes here. So what I need to do, this is coming straight from above. I mean, you can see now his abs, like his stomach just completely disappears from the light. But the light will also come slightly like this, you know. So what I need to do is maybe tilt it just a tiny bit in one direction so that you can see roughly where that light's going to go. Right. And that's going to be my transition point. So now this is where it will start to curve under into shadow. Good evening, Bone Shooter. How are you? This transition will also happen quite fast, so that's going to have to be a pretty short like change. Okay, so now I can grab a bit of this intermediate tone, and then I know down here, this is where my kind of bounce lights and stuff will go. I know here that this isn't gonna get too much light, but it will get a little bit extra because it'll bounce off of his arm. And we kind of talked about that last time. So this bounce light might be a little bit stronger just because it'll bounce off of his bicep there. Then we can kind of flip them over. Thanks for the 2 bits, Michael. No, I don't know how to say that. Thanks, Michael. Locally, I mean, I would if people wanted it, but I don't know. I've become sort of, I'm like old news locally, you know? People just, they're like, they don't care. Like, that's Eric. He used to hang out at the game store and paint all the time. Like, nobody cares. I'm going to teach classes at Nova. I'll be there. Okay, so we kind of create this this bounce light, right? Makes sense. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Michael. I tell anyone that wants me to teach a class, if they want me to teach a class, they have to organize it, right? Like I'll show up, you get the people, I'll show up and teach. But yeah, I mean, I could just spend my time painting. I don't have time to organize and like try and push a class. All right, let's look at where we're at. Okay, it's kind of coming together. Still a lot of work to do on the face and the arms, and of course the back. I'm getting ready. Yeah, I think I'll take a break here for a minute, and then continue on with some of this stuff. All right, let me read this. Blue Frog, sup Eric, with regards to shadows, I'm not sure whether to paint in my strong shadows with hard lines or keep them soft, slightly noisy, blended. Working on a Wolverine bust, I went with a darkish earth olive for the shadows with a cold yellow for the main base. By the way, your skin tones are always on point. I really like the execution. So it depends, right? Like if you, it's all about the shape, right? Here, this shadow, right, is supposed to be like a cast shadow of his head. So this gets a stronger line, right? The separation between this muscle and this muscle is like a sharp change in planes, right? Let me grab something to kind of demonstrate. Okay, let's use the box from Mark, for example. Right? If I hold the box like this, right? Well, this is facing towards the light. This isn't. So this is a corner here. There's a bit of a roundedness to it, but the change in light and shadow is hard because it's a hard corner, right? Or if we take a bottle of paint, you know, something round, find something bigger, right? Here you can see the shadow on this is more subtle because it's a curve, right? This is a curve. This is a subtle curve. So it's all about the shape. I mean, I know what the belt I want to be, right? So I'm fine leaving it black for the moment. I'm more just worried about the skin at the moment. Like, if it was going to really affect the kind of color composition of the figure, I would probably put some color down immediately. But because I know the gloves are going to be black, the belt's going to be black, this is going to be gold, right? There's not a whole lot going on. Then I might do some kind of tape or something around the gloves. So it won't really mess with my kind of perception of color or anything. Okay, I'll be right back. Be back in 5. I'm going to kind of show you how I would consider like refining some of this stuff, right? So we've got all these color tones throughout, and using a pretty thin layer, I'm gonna do a mix of like stippling, glazing, right? And I'm just gonna start to introduce some variation into the skin using different layers, right? So I'm not really trying to make a perfect blend per se. I want some irregularity, right? My skin is not perfectly smooth. I have little blemishes and changes and wrinkles and all that. Right, so using little dots and stuff, I can slowly begin to create little nuances in the skin. I don't want any like perfectly hard lines. Hi, Honest Gamer 101. Hello. What am I using? What do you mean, what am I using? Paintbrush, what? What specifically? What kind of paint? A mix of Vallejo and Chimera. Now, this is just because, in terms of these like hard shapes, this is more because I'm trying to do a bit of a realistic character, right? He's a bit more on the realism side. If I was doing a comic book character, maybe some hard lines would be good. If I was going for a specific like stylistic look to the anatomy. I'm doing a canvas that's bigger than a 75-inch TV of acrylic. Well, this is I don't think you'd want to spend the money on miniature paints to do a canvas like that. Is this thing blinking all over the place? Drives me nuts when it does that. Hold on. Come on. All right, knock it off. Cool. All right, so we start to soften some of these shapes. Maybe here. We can get some small reflections in there. So the goal is to just continue to, this is a slow process, but we just keep continually introducing more subtle volume and change. right? Like so, somewhere like here, right? Right here, maybe I bridge these together a little bit to create a small little shape there. Good morning. Thanks for the follow, Honest Gamer, and Tundil Bolo Fa Derdrite. I don't know how. Come on. Come on, dude. All right, so we can introduce some of these really, really subtle volume shifts, right? And all of these little things, they start to really soften the skin. Right? And then always zooming out a little to kind of see where it's at, if it's working as a whole. So I don't think this one's quite working quite right. Right? Let's look at it from the side. Okay, you can sort of see here where it starts to curve over. Right? You can see that? So this line is really more so this needs to come down more or come up more. The shadow needs to come up more to follow the shape of this. Well, I assume it's in German, but I don't speak any German, so. So we move it up a little. Merge these a little more. Soften that transition a little bit. When you just sketched in that shadow, did you keep the brush on the model and swish it all the way across? Yeah, so it was like one big, like just make a mark, you know? And then I can soften the mark out. Confidence in your brushstroke can be a big thing. All right, so because I make all these, right, I can take even this color like this. I can grab pure this color, and if it's nice and thin, right? Max Sarliha. Hello. If it's nice and thin, right, I can use it subtly to just introduce this rich warm brown in areas where I want it to increase increase this color a little bit and add some more variation. It's a very subtle effect, but it can create, more variation in the skin tone. Same with grabbing kind of pure color like this in some of the highlights, some of the brighter areas. Right, make some marks. So just don't be super linear with your tones. Let it give it some variation. It'll make it much more interesting overall. No, I don't varnish every model I paint. No. The only time I varnish really is if I'm like not happy with the current finish on the model. Right, if maybe something gets a little too glossy or whatever, I might add some varnish, but I don't typically find the need to. All right, so now like something on his obliques, maybe some of these are a little too harsh. So we've got to come in and sort of soften some of this stuff out. This doesn't need to be that strong of a contrast. Some people will varnish like everything. I don't tend to think that figures need to have a like perfectly consistent finish across the whole surface. Later, Jonas, I have a good one. What do I think is the biggest problem people make with base coats? They don't let them dry fully before they paint back over top of them. That's the number one problem I see people make with base coats. They like rub at the surface too much. Even here where I'm working in like very thin layers, I did some stuff here and I moved somewhere else while that dries. And I make changes to a different area, and then once it's dry I can come back to that area and then make some further changes, right? I think the other problem I see people have with doing base coats is that they think that it has to be like super thin to do a base coat. Your paint does not need to be that thin on a base coat. Thanks, Tundle. Tundle third. Thankfully, I've picked up on this for the most part, but every now and then I have to tell myself, well, let it dry. Yeah. Yeah, the problem is what happens is when you rub at it, you start to pick up the layer as it's still drying, right? You start to lift the paint, and that'll cause you to get these like, bumps and stuff in the paint because you're moving around drying pigment. All right, let's look at his stomach kind of from this angle, see if there's like anything that particularly stands out. I think maybe we can knock this down just a little bit more. So kind of here, I'm gonna take that down a little, and I'm looking at it and trying to see, maybe I want to push that up just a little bit. So just subtly here, maybe just a small amount of light catches on right there. And a small amount of light catches here, but maybe not so far over. Right, so we can kind of soften it that way. But also push that just a little bit more. Is he looking appropriately shredded yet? Right. And there's all about, we've really started to like build this cohesiveness to the musculature, right? Okay. It's feeling pretty good. Let's add a little more light in here. I don't want this to be quite so dark. I could think about this light coming kind of in here. The separation of the abs. Right, that light maybe comes down a little further. We get a little bit of that V shape. How you doing? Possibly. And Ellie fire spray? A fire spray? I don't know. A. I'm gonna go with Ellie. How are you? Welcome. Thanks. We're just doing some painting here. We keep it relaxing in the stream. If you got any painting questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I kind of just explain my thought process, or try to anyways. Just keep it kind of relaxed. Right, we'll put a little bit of light here. Right, so I'm going to emphasize this. I'm going to like exaggerate it so you can see that I'm placing a sort of light in this recess here because it follows the center line that we have. And then once we've got that sort of center line, we can then kind of soften and bridge these shapes together. Create a nice surface. Okay. CQC contact. How are you? Hi, Knock. Yeah, I mean, I'm here if you got questions. Otherwise, I'm just hanging out. All right, so here's a good example. So we've got this sort of, there is an overlap here, right, of these two muscle groups. Right, you've got the bicep and the deltoid here, but we want to connect them somewhat. So it feels like one, solid arm. He doesn't have, there's not a literal separation in his arm here. And if we wanted, we could paint some wrinkles or whatever to create a kind of connection. Right, maybe there's a little bit of skin folding there. Oh, we're going to do that. It's going to happen. Have I ever done it before? No. No, but we are. That is the plan. The actual like sweat droplets will be a later thing. Because we want to just get the surface of the skin right first, and then we can kind of focus on that. Because those sweat drops are like a very detail thing. Like that's like a super refined level of detail to do tiny sweat droplets. I can paint one for you real quick if you're going to want to see what I mean. But like a sweat droplet might be something like he's got some sweat here. And it's as little as like a tiny little line that you're going to be barely imperceptible. Right? It might be something like this. And then you'd get like another little reflection inside it. Right? It might be something as small as something like that. But then when we do that all over, you know. So that'll be a much later effect we're going for. And I will have like reference material to base that off of. And this is it's much easier to see that sweat and stuff on darker skinned people. Right? Those shines, those specular highlights of the sweat like are much more visible. Than on a pale guy. Well, I mean, it's happened, you know. Yeah, we're not doing the blue sweat Gatorade commercials. Good reference though for like how it would appear, right? Like the shapes and how it would be on the skin. Who my favorite 2D painters are? Yeah, sure. Frank Frazetta, Wei Wang. I like this guy named Dan DeSantos. Let's see, who else? Assad Ribic. Roberto Fieri, if you want to go back further. Like those are all living painters. Well, not Frank, but if you want to go back further, you could get like classical painters. Caravaggio, John Singer Sargent. Velasquez, I mean, he's done some paintings I like. He's not one of my favorite. Yeah. How about you guys? You guys got any favorites? Huh? I mean, there's a lot of like really talented, like modern or contemporary fantasy artists. There's a lot. I really like Alex Ross. Alex Ross is I think super talented, and he has a very Norman Rockwell style to his art. I could say Norman Rockwell. Even though a lot of people, well, I guess now I think people would consider him a painter, but maybe they, like a fine artist. Though a lot of like in his day was considered more of an illustrator than a fine artist, but whatever. Oh yeah, dude, Spectrum's awesome. A lot of really beautiful art in there. So, what have you taken from 2D artists that made the greatest difference to your miniature paintings? Uh, Hi, Simulador. Hello. Probably the way I do lighting would be considered like more of a illustrative style than like your typical miniature painter. I think that's probably the thing like I would point to say like yeah, this is more of an illustrative effect than the kind of generalist lighting that has long been associated with miniature painting. I actually find some things humorous about that, considering how much prevalence non-metallic metal has in miniature painting. Yet the idea of like a cast shadow is kind of novel. I think it's, you know, becoming more the norm now, but like in, realistically, like look at canvas paintings. Of course, there's cast shadows everywhere. But amongst miniature painters, like that was kind of an odd thing, but like non-metallic metal is an illustrative technique, right? Or using the illusion of a surface to create reflections and things like that. Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of become like, I guess, like my signature now. Like people recognize me for doing it, but like I'm not the first person to do it. You know, I honestly I don't know who the first person. I couldn't tell you who the first person to paint cast shadows on a figure are. Maybe I'm the person who's like done the most extreme versions. But someone like Alfonso Giraldes or Ruben Martinez, you know, I'd seen it done before. And I think now you've got a guy like Moses Yao, who's very good at emulating like traditional fantasy paintings, right? Like super good at recreating a Patrick Jones or a Julie Bell or, somebody like that. I did. I did judge his work at Monty. why. I mean, yeah, classical, like, yeah, if it's Baroque style, sure. And I think maybe what it took was for someone to like do it was to have the subject matter to do it on, right? Now that you got a company like Mindworks or whatever making figures based off of these kind of styles, that it's more people are more excited to try that. For a while, like, you'd have so many Paul Bonner type illustrations and things. What I'm interested in is how people can take that. You learn from the ones who came before us, and you take that sort of approach and style and you incorporate it into your own. You see where the art can evolve from there. I think it's an exciting time. I've seen Moses cop flack online for lacking creativity, but I'm curious to know how it's different from transcribing an illustration into miniature like so many painters, yourself included, have done. What's your take on that? Maybe we're getting too political, though. No, I don't mind answering that. Yes, I have done recreations of fantasy illustrations. I have won big awards for doing recreations of fantasy illustrations. Moses won a platinum, which is like one of the higher prizes at Monty for doing a recreation of a Roberto Fieri painting. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I have no problem with it. I think how do I phrase this? I personally would like to do more original stuff, right? Fan art is cool. Everyone enjoys doing fan art, right? But I would also like to break into doing more of my own original stuff, whether it's collaboration, where I'm art directing or working with a sculptor who has an idea, and we're figuring out like how we can create our own individual piece. Yeah. Where I see a problem is when that's all you do. Okay? I have no issues doing a master study or a piece of fan art or whatever. Copy a box art or whatnot. When it's all you do, it shows a certain lack of initiative or creativity. Like I'd personally love to see what Moses can do on like, a figure that's never been painted before, right? Give him a box art that's not based on a painting, right? Give him a big child figure or whatever, whoever, right? Not like a Mindworks one that's based on a painting of a specific, like someone's specific painting. A character like Sienna Starkiller, right? She actually had a colored illustration, but you take a character like this and let's see what you can do, like creating your own thing. I'd love to see that. Not because I don't think he can, but I'd like to see what he would do to develop his like own style, right? Your style is a culmination of all of the things you've learned. You take a little bit from this guy, you take a little bit from this painter, this inspiration, this, right? A lot of people would probably say I paint like World of Warcraft, like some, not this figure, but some other figures, right? I have like a World of Warcraft style, obviously, because it's a big influence on me and I like the artwork. But it's not my only style, you know? I hope that answered your question. This has come up. So I'm basing this on Justin Gaethje. It is the actual figure is not any particular person, but I am attempting to make it look like him. Where was I? Oh, yeah. There's kind of a question in judging that's like, hey, how do you judge something that's, not their own creation or whatever, right? If you have two pieces that are equally good, let's say you have Kyrgios, who won in 2019 or whatever, right? And it's a creation entirely of his own design, assuming, I think so. Versus someone who did a fan art, and they're equally good. And is it a painting contest or an art contest? Do you give further value to the person who created their character entirely of their own? Yeah, I think you do. If I'm judging two sculpts, Kyrgios Grizzly? No, I know I'm talking about Kyrgios Simas. Kyrgios Grizzly, I don't. What is the middle? Salmon skin or pink skin? It's this one's pink skin. Pink skin. Maybe last time I used salmon skin. I don't remember. I may have used fuchsia skin. Who knows? It's not super important. It's more important is how you mix them together. Anyways, I don't remember where I was with this whole conversation. But it's been a big discussion. Well, maybe not big, but it's been a discussion amongst a few of us recently about like the idea of like, self-creation or cooperative creation. Like this figure, for example. This figure is entirely of Mark and Hugo's creation. And I think that deserves something. Are the pecs a physical ridge? Pecs a physical ridge, or is just the shading to make it seem so? How do you mean a ridge? The sternum, like here? This needs to be softened anyways. I haven't really gotten to that part. The whole like neck area and stuff. This all has a lot of work to be done on it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in the This, there is some very subtle, like, wave to it, but it's very slight. And yes, there is shape to the muscle. Some of the muscles are more defined than what I've painted them. Some of them are less defined. Yeah, but there's people in the miniature world that think if we want to be taken seriously as artists, that we need to do more of our own creation. But the miniature painting art side, so they are somewhat together, right? The commercial side and the art side do go hand in hand, but they're not entirely one-to-one, right? So what necessarily sells good and what people want to necessarily create are two different things. I think it totally can be fine art. I think miniature painting, absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to paint the tattoos. There will be tattoos. Just that comes later. I absolutely think miniature painting should be considered fine art. If I printed this is there a difference between me painting a figure at this size and me painting a 1-to-1 scale of this, or a quarter scale bust, right? If I was to make this figure 2 feet tall, right? Would there be a difference? I'm not sure about that. That arguably this is harder. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think the scale, like maybe some things require finer motor skills, but I don't necessarily think that one is easier than the other just because it's bigger. I think they're different. No, and that's the other thing. The fine art world is, you can duct tape a banana to a wall and kind of call it fine art. Like, I think the fine art world is kind of stupid anyways. And I don't really necessarily seek the the approval of those people. But I also think there's a big difference between me painting something like this, right, and me painting this, right? This is hobbying. This is a craft. And I follow a step by step. It's a 3-dimensional coloring book. Okay. There's not a whole lot of thought and consideration that goes into painting a Space Marine like this versus painting something like this. Now, this Space Marine, maybe there is, right? I had to do these designs myself, right? There's some lighting effects, a little more thought that goes into it, right? So, craft, maybe getting closer to fine art. And then something like this. But I mean, that's a whole thing, you know. And again, I would say, does it really matter? I am, yes. Big Rig Higgs, I am a fan of MMA. That's another thing about the fan art thing in miniature painting, like, you know, emulating an illustration in 3 dimensions. Yes, it does require some thought and attention to, you know, volumes and trying to figure out how to emulate, because some illustrations don't exactly convert to 3 dimensions, right? So there's definitely some thought and technical execution that is involved, but then there's also the whole thing of, like, a lot of the color choices and stuff are already made for you. The lighting is often, you know, considered for you. So yeah, one definitely requires less decision making, and I'm never going to make the argument that, like, it's definitely easier to paint a emulation of an illustration than it is to create something entirely from scratch. Sorry, Barnsdale doesn't exist. Or maybe you just typed in the wrong. Maybe you just typed in the wrong. What's it called? Command. Wouldn't the volumes on quarter scale be more challenging? You would add more gradient versus the smaller scales, but you don't have room to do that. So on something like quarter scale, actually, you can rely on the natural light a lot more than you can on a miniature. But you also have a lot more room for doing really subtle micro details on something that large, right? people who do like creature effects that are ultra realistic, man, like that stuff's crazy. It should totally be considered like that's art, right? See you later. Can't believe we're having a what is art conversation right now. Yeah, but what even is art? Oh, sorry. Hard to reach down here. Yeah, 9 buckets full of fan falling over. I think that's the same guy who did the yeah. I mean, it's like experiential art. Do whatever. If you enjoy it, I don't care. If it does something for you, I mean, sure. Is architecture art? Yeah, I would say absolutely. Is all architecture art? Is your copy and pasted house that goes up and down your neighborhood every 4 houses or something art? I don't know. That's more utilitarian, isn't it? Yeah. So I have sort of the same thing with $2 too. Hi. Hello. Yeah. I mean, is all mini painting art? Yeah, probably not. This isn't quite right. We gotta fix this a little bit. This needs to come in a little more like this. And then we can adjust that collarbone. Yeah, so there's gatekeeping and everything. There's also the question of, do you create, who are you creating it for? Are you creating it for yourself? If you're creating it for yourself, then who cares? Like commercial art is like a totally different thing, you know? All right. Let's work on the neck some more. We need to get some more we've got the general lights and shadows painting the neck, but I need to get some more of these midtones in here and start to figure this stuff out. Also, at some point, I'm going to have to paint some of the like wrinkles in the neck. I'm also looking if I want a cast shadow. Right. How far down do I want that cast shadow to go? Do I want it to go on like onto his... Do I really want to go extreme and have it like come down like all the way down here? Or do I want, These are questions. Or do I cheat, which this cast shadow of his neck doesn't really follow the lighting scheme per se, but it allows me to create some kind of more aesthetic design with the shadow. It's time to order pizza. All right, go for it, man. I'm not stopping you. I wouldn't dare. Someone mentioned earlier the everlasting wet palette, right? Yeah, like it's starting to dry out a little bit. We're probably not going to go too much longer, honestly. We've been going, what, a little over 3 hours. That's typically about our time. And I think we've made some generally good progress on the figure. This come down a little lower. I want this line. I want this shadow to come down pretty far on his neck. And then have it slope a bit more. Something like that. Got nothing else to do on the road. Say, man, time to play some video games or do some painting or whatever, All right. I think that's going to do it about for today. You can kind of see where we're at. We've gotten some nice progress done. I mean, considering we started a little bit further than what this is, in terms of sketch. compared to that. I think we've made some decent headway. If you're interested in the figure, try and do some promotion. Check out Mark's shop. He's got this one, the lumberjack, the lady with the beer. There's some cool figures. You also get a tutorial by Mark with each of them on how he painted it. Yeah. Like, follow, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Otherwise, thanks for joining me today.